Make the grade on the Deadwood Central and the Rapid Canyon line. The old Black Hills of Fort Pierre running right on time. Smell the smoke of iron and steel, step away from the mighty wheel. Train, train, gonna take me down the track. Train, train, I ain't ever coming back. Riding on the highline, heading up the canyon, crossing the river, leave all my kids abandoned. I love the train. Only.
The sound of steam locomotion has pierced the silence of the Black Hills for over 100 years, and it continues today. There's been a special love for the sight and sound and smells of steam locomotion, no matter where it is. Here in the Black Hills of South Dakota, mountain railroads have written another interesting chapter in their colorful history.
For a long time, there had been rumors of gold in the Black Hills, but it took an official military expedition in 1874, led by Colonel George Armstrong Custer, to confirm that gold did in fact exist in the Black Hills.
Once Custer found gold and reported on it, that's the thing. Custer wasn't a man to hide his light under a bushel. And once he found gold and talked about it, he was a publicity seeker, everybody heard about it. And they could come to Sydney on the UP, or to Cheyenne, or to Yankton on the, or to Bismarck. And then they could get here fairly easily, 200-300 miles, walk or ride or however. And once that, and of course remember, this is happening during the Depression of 1873. There are an awful lot of people at loose ends. And they figured, I'm starving to death on the farm, can't sell anything if I could raise it, so why not go to a gold rush? I might get something and it'll be a summer's vacation anyway. Get away from the missus for a while, or something of that nature.
The gold rush was on to the Black Hills. There were hundreds of mines and mills scattered all over the hills, but as early as 1876, the northern Black Hills was proven to have the largest gold ore bodies. The Homestake Mining Company, founded in 1877 by George Hurst, quickly became the gold mining giant in the Black Hills. With its rapidly growing mining operation, which was powered by steam, timber was required in large quantities. To haul the timber from the nearby forests, Homestake decided to build its own railroad.
I'm just on the outskirts of Lead City, walking along the rails for what was the first railroad in the Black Hills. The Black Hills and Fort Pierre Railroad, which was established in 1881 by Homestake Mining Company. The Homestake Mining Company had to bring their first engine in, which was the J.B. Hagen. Seeing as how there was no railroads into the hills, they had to bring the first engine in by ox train. They extended the first tracks from Lead to Buck's Landing out at Robay, somewhat over 12 miles. That was their first landing to bring timber in to the mines for use for cordwood and timbers for the mine.
While the BH and FP was busy south of Lead, the citizens of Deadwood decided that it was time they had themselves a rail line too. In August of 1888, the Deadwood Central Railroad was incorporated to build a grand 344-mile system of narrow-gauge track to points all over the Black Hills area. Grading began in October 1888, and the first train rolled from Deadwood up to Lead in February 1889. The line never did quite make the 344-mile goal, but it did turn into another of the Black Hills' unique narrow-gauge operations.
Railroading in the 1880s was a very exciting and challenging business. It meant so much to communities that had railroads, and it was such a moneymaker that the excitement around generated by the railroads was something else. The railroads also were a factor of safety. During some of the forest fires that would spring up around the area, they would alert people by blowing their whistles and running up and down the line and getting people away from the fire and taking them to safety. There are even stories about how people who were injured or became sick in outlying parts of the area were rushed by the railroad to the doctor to get them their health care.
Probably the most notable service on the Deadwood Central lines was the electric interurban cars that ran between Deadwood and Lead from 1902 until 1924. The little trolley that kept a schedule that can't be matched even by a car today was owned and operated by the Burlington. Both the BH and FP and the Deadwood Central were railroads that originated in the northern Black Hills and didn't connect to any outside rail systems. Both of these were taken over by the Burlington route at the turn of the century.
The next chapter of Black Hills railroading history was written by the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroads, who built the first standard gauge track into the Black Hills of Dakota Territory. As a subsidiary company of the Northwestern, the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad began construction at Fremont, Nebraska in 1869. The Elkhorn line connected to the Union Pacific at Fremont and owed a lot of its initial success to the Union Pacific.
Once the Northwestern management decided to head for the hills, there was a flurry of activity to get the rails in place. Construction progressed through Nebraska and on into Dakota Territory in late 1885.
On November 28, 1885, the first train from the outside world rolled into the jubilant community of Buffalo Gap, Dakota Territory. This event was marked with the driving of a tin spike made with ores from the Black Hills and driven into the railroad tie with this hammer made of Black Hills mica. The next spring, the tracks were laid on up through Hermosa and on into a bustling rapid city.
The Elkhorn built a system of narrow gauge railroads beyond Lead and Deadwood. Now, narrow gauge was used in most all of your mountain railroads all across the United States. Narrow gauge is only 36 inches wide, and we have a set of that track right here. The narrow gauge was used because it could go around much tighter corners, and the narrow gauge could climb much steeper grades. Our two outside tracks are what we call standard gauge. Now that's 4 feet 8.5 inches and was used basically throughout the United States. Here in the Black Hills, they oftentimes used a 3-rail setup, which accommodated either the narrow gauge railroad or the standard gauge railroad.
The Burlington route gained access to the Black Hills in 1890 and early 1891 by way of its subsidiary company, the Grand Island and Wyoming Central. The Black Hills extension left the main line at the newly completed terminal of Edgemont, South Dakota in the spring of 1890 and continued to build northward into the center of the Black Hills. One of the main engineering feats of even getting into the hills was crossing Sheep Canyon. It required a wooden trestle to span a 600-foot canyon. New towns sprang up along the line, as well as the railroad passing through established mining camps like Custer, Hill City, and Rochford. The race to Deadwood between the Grand Island and Wyoming Central and the Northwestern's Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley was on. Elkhorn won the race to Deadwood by a scant month in 1890, and the first train sparked a wonderful celebration. But Burlington was able to take over the two Northern Hills narrow gauge lines, the Black Hills and Fort Pierre and the Deadwood Central, by 1904. This was truly the beginning of the golden era of Black Hills steam railroads. As early as 1898, Belle Fourche, on the northern edge of the Black Hills, had become the largest cattle shipping point in the nation. For several years at the turn of the century, Northwestern rails carried millions of cattle, sheep, and horses. Belle Fourche was a boom town.
Belle Fourche was started because of the railroad and the grass. They brought the cattle in on rail, shipped them out on rail from chutes somewhat like this, where they parked the rail cars, probably 8 or 10 at a time, and loaded 8 or 10 cars at a time. The cowboys loaded the cars. One of the things they hated the worst because they couldn't do it a horseback. Between here and Middle Creek Butte up there, 12 Mile Butte up there in the distance, my dad said he had seen it solid with cattle waiting their turns to be loaded. Of course, there were intervals between the cattle so that they didn't get mixed, but the cowboys mostly took care of that.
On the narrow gauge, the passenger train between Deadwood and the higher hills was soon nicknamed the Slim Princess. In 1903, the Chicago and Northwestern formally merged with the Elkhorn into the Northwestern. People, timber, ore, and other goods were able to move easier through the mountains of the Black Hills.
Tourism was beginning to grow in the Black Hills, and railroads were going to play a major role in the development of this new industry. President Calvin Coolidge came to the Black Hills via the Northwestern Railroad in the summer of 1927 to dedicate a mountain carving that would forever change tourism for the whole state of South Dakota and certainly the Black Hills region.
The people of South Dakota are taking the lead in the preparation of this memorial out of their meager resources, because the American spirit is strong among them. Their effort and courage entitles them to the sympathy and support of private beneficence and the national government. They realize fully that they have no means of succeeding in the development of their state except a reliance upon American institutions. They do not fail to appreciate their value.
That carving became Mount Rushmore, the nation's shrine of democracy. Tourists put more trains on the Northwestern Main Line running from Chicago to Rapid City. Special promotional brochures and films were produced to encourage more people to visit the many wonders of the Black Hills.
It doesn't take long to get aboard, and before we know it, the big wheels of the locomotive are beginning to turn, and we're off. For here we are at Rapid City, getting off the train and filling our lungs with our first deep breaths of the tingling mountain air. This carefree crowd getting ready to pile into the waiting buses happens to be an all-expense escorted Northwestern tour party. Those popular tours make fine vacations, inexpensive, everything planned for you, and a lot of fun. There are a number of these attractive resorts hidden in the little valleys, and cozy cabins perched in vantage points high on the canyon walls, all offering excellent accommodations and a wide variety of sport. Not far from here is Wind Cave National Park. Government rangers take parties through at frequent intervals. They explain how it was discovered by a cowboy hunting deer when he was attracted by a strange whistling noise coming from a small hole in the hill. Thus the name Wind Cave. It stretches back into the earth more than 10 miles and has never been completely explored. But we must be on our way again.
The Burlington, with its high line to Deadwood, was able to play its role in tourism, adding several rail spurs throughout the hills that serve both passenger and freight needs. Hot Springs in the southern hills, with its warm mineral baths and swimming pools, was a key destination point. The most scenic Burlington line ran 30 miles from Englewood through Spearfish Canyon to Spearfish, South Dakota from 1893 to 1934 and was another delight for passengers. At that time, the beauty of the canyon was difficult to reach other than by rail.
This is Savoy. In railroad days in Spearfish Canyon, this was the most spectacular spot on the Burlington's line that ran from Englewood through here and down the canyon to Spearfish. This was a spot where the train would stop. There was an inn here. It was known by several different names over the years, first Glendoris and then Latch String Inn, and now it's the Homestakes Heritage Center for the Canyon. But people here could stop, stretch their legs a bit after a spectacular run over high trestles down Spearfish Canyon. And from here then the train would chuff off down to Spearfish. The old footage that you see from 1916, and this is some of the oldest railroad footage available on trains in the Black Hills, gives you an idea of what this place looked like at that time.
Homestake controlled stewardship of all the water rights and large tracts of land along the creek bottom of Spearfish Canyon. Working with the state game and fish departments of South Dakota and Wyoming, they introduced rainbow trout to the northern hill streams.
Well, right behind me is what for a lot of people who rode the train to Spearfish was the main attraction, Spearfish Canyon and Spearfish Creek. The creek looks like a trout stream. Everybody thought it ought to be a trout stream, but when the frontier came to the Black Hills, no trout lived in this stream. Federal government got into the act. Trout were brought in and stocked, but one of the only accesses to a lot of trout stocking places, including Spearfish Canyon, was the train. Now, fishing by train in this canyon was a unique experience. You simply got on the train, rode to a spot where you wanted to fish, got the conductor to stop the train, got off, fished. A few hours later, the train would come back the other direction, scrambled up to the tracks, flagged the train down, hauled your fish on board, and you were on your way.
Heavy snows filled the canyon in the winter, and spring rains caused flooding of this twisting mountain railroad, making life for train employees more than interesting.
The winters were tough up here. The cuts up by Trojan are so deep, there's no place to pile the snow, so we just have to ram through there the best way we could. And if they got too tough, they'd bring a big snowplow from down on the main line up and clear them out. That's the only way you get through.
Yet another railroad to make its mark in Black Hills railroad history was the Rapid City Black Hills and Western. It had a lot of different names. It was better known as the Rapid Canyon Line or the Crouch Line.
To others, it was advertised as the crookedest railroad on earth. This standard gauge railroad ran from Rapid City on the east to Mystic on the west, a total of 35 miles. This short line crossed Rapid Creek 105 times. The Rapid Canyon was the only east-to-west rail link in the Black Hills area, and it served a vital role.
This is the roadbed of the Rapid Canyon Line. It went from Rapid City to Mystic. It was an idea of going from coast to coast, but it never served more than the trains coming into Rapid City as a connection with the trains that went out at Mystic.
The Warren Lamb Lumber Company built a spur off the Rapid Canyon Line to transport logs and lumber from their operations as far north as Sheridan Lake.
The area that is High Sega now was known originally as Spring Gulch. A group of 16 came over from Pierre, and they came to camp from August the 8th through the 18th in 1908. And while they were here, they decided to name their camp. And to do that, they put together the first initial of the 6 girls' names: Helen, Ida, Sadie, Ethel, Grace, and Ada, to come up with the name of High Sega. And the section gang that worked on the Crouch Line near there liked the name so much that they took it, and eventually the name of the area became High Sega.
Back in the early 40s, I was going to the School of Mines in Rapid City, and there really wasn't that much to do around town on weekends. So I used to go down to the Windy and Dusty, which that's what we call the Mystic Railroad. I don't remember the full name, but for 50 cents you could get on the train and ride up Rapid Canyon to any point that you wanted. And when you got to the point you wanted, you just pulled the emergency cord and the train stopped and you got off with all your tackle and lunch and all that type of thing. And you spent the afternoon or the rest of the morning and the afternoon fishing. And then when the train came back from Mystic in the afternoon, you stood alongside the track, and the train rolled down to you with the rails rocking and the ties pumping, but because the road was in bad shape. This was not too long after that it closed, but it was a very enjoyable way to spend most of a Saturday or Sunday, although I guess you shouldn't go fishing on the Sabbath, but that's the way it was.
The beauty of Rapid Canyon with its steep limestone cliffs and rugged gullies may have inspired this anonymous poem about the Rapid Canyon line. If you're looking for an outing, let me do a little scouting, for I know a place that's surely fine. Come to Frink's for dinner, 'cause your appetite's a winner when you spend a day up on our little Rapid Canyon line.
It was the golden age of railroad. Narrow gauge, standard gauge, 3-rail, steam or oil, railroads were king.
All the railroads began to feel the influence of the automobile and trucking, each of which spelled doom for Black Hills railroads. The last passenger train ran down the line from Deadwood to Edgemont in the late 1940s.
Steam locomotion began to be replaced by diesel locomotives on all the railroads in the United States in the early 1950s. And it was no exception here in the Black Hills. Both the Northwestern and the Burlington route began to dieselize about the same time. The High Line from Edgemont to Deadwood began to see SD9 locomotives about this period, and they began to hold down all the chores on the High Line. The Black, Red, and Gray of the Burlington, the Northern Pacific, the Great Northern, and the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle railroads merged to form the Burlington Northern in 1970. The principal traffic for the last 3 decades of the High Line's existence was coal, primarily for the power plant at Kirk, just south of Lead. When the Kirk power plant decided to transport their coal from Wyoming by trucks, the end came for the northern end of the High Line. In the fall of 1983, the last trains ran north of Custer to Deadwood and Lead.
As with everything else, the only constant is change. Railroads came out to the Black Hills over 100 years ago and left their marks that can still be seen and even used today. Many miles of the Burlington right-of-way are being cleaned up and used in the George S. Mickelson Rails to Trails program.
Railroads were a major builder of the Black Hills. Miners, storekeepers, lawyers, and farmers, they all came by railroad. And they depended on the train for their transportation and their livelihood. This brief history of railroads in the Black Hills just brushes the surface of the mountain railroads. For the complete story, check out the series of books by Rick Mills that covers the history of railroads in the state of South Dakota and the Black Hills.
Today, there are still trains running on some of the original track. The Burlington Northern serves the West Slope and the Chicago Northwestern on the east side. Here in Rapid City, the Chicago Northwestern has been served for many years by Bob Sharp.
My name is Robert Sharp. We're an engineer for the Chicago Northwestern. And I like my job because it's a good job and it's going to get better. I think the future is all in railroad.
The other area of active rail operations is the steam train in Hill City, South Dakota. The Black Hills Central Railroad, or 1880 train as it's called locally. Started in 1957, this historic mountain train has extended its tracks to the Keystone Junction. Local residents Bob and Joanna Warder have kept this history alive by purchasing the railroad in 1990. Train enthusiasts from all over the world come to visit.
There are many rail fans, both ex-railroad employees and people that have been just tremendously enthused about trains that never worked for them. But there are many retired railroad and even current railroad employees come by. Even if they don't write it, they look, they visit, they talk, they buy railroad memorabilia. There have been some of the old retired railroad employees from every railroad in the United States here to either look at it or ride it or just to walk around and visit.
Today, the Black Hills Central offers a 2-hour round trip or 1-hour one-way, which gives you a chance to have the same experience of traveling through the beautiful forests, canyons, and meadows as the people did over 100 years ago. You'll travel by Harney Peak, over 7,200 feet high. It's the highest point between the Rockies and the Alps. A AAA-approved attraction, the Black Hills Central rail trips are sometimes hosted by Carrie Nation, Calamity Jane, or Barb Wire, and they'll provide some living history as you pass old tin and gold mine sites. At the depot in Hill City, you can walk around the engine and watch the mighty old steamer be filled with water. The depot was built in 1890 and contains the ticket office and a gift shop full of memorabilia that railroad buffs will enjoy. Historic engines and rail cars have been or are in the process of being restored and are open for visitation and service, such as the Highliner restaurant, located in a restored dining car. While you dine, you can watch all the rail activities. But the Warders have a lot more future plans.
We'd like to establish a museum here in Hill City that would contain memorabilia and artifacts and maybe some pieces of equipment, maybe not rolling stock, but that would be peculiar to those railroads that have operated in the Black Hills.
The railroads of the Black Hills may not be the economic and entertainment factor they once were, but they are alive and well.
Here at the 1880 train, you can catch the railroad fever. The smells and sounds of steam locomotion take you back to a time of long ago. But until then, this will have to be your window into the ageless beauty of the Black Hills of South Dakota and a train experience you'll never forget.
Train, train, gonna take me down the track. Train, train, I ain't ever coming back. The engineer at the throttle, gonna whistle in a new day. Blue sky above me, not a cloud in my way. I love the train, I love the train.